I still remember the exact sentence that made the room go quiet. Not the kind of quiet you get when people are listening, the kind you get when something breaks and everyone hears it. Daniel will not be receiving anything from the estate. The lawyer's voice was calm, professional, almost bored. My brother Owen didn't look at me. My sister Claire exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. And just like that, I was erased. If you'd asked me a month earlier, I would have told you my family was complicated, but intact, messy, loud, sometimes cruel, but still family. That illusion died in a wood-paneled conference room that smelled like lemon polish and old money. I'm Daniel, the other child, the one who stayed. And apparently, the one they decided didn't count. When the lawyer's office called, I almost didn't answer. I was in my car, outside the house I grew up in, the same house my father died in. I'd been sitting there longer than I meant to, staring at the front door like it might open and undo everything. The voicemail said, "This is regarding the reading of your father's will." Not discussion, not clarification. That should have been my first warning. Owen and Claire had flown in from out of state. They always did when money was involved. Birthdays? No. Holidays? Rarely. But inheritances had a way of reuniting people who couldn't stand each other. I walked into the office alone. They were already seated together. Owen is older than me by 6 years, confident, polished, the kind of man who learned early that volume can substitute for truth. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than my car, leaned back in his chair like he owned the place. Claire sat beside him, perfect posture, crossed legs, hands folded neatly in her lap. If Owen was fire, Claire was ice. She didn't need to raise her voice. She just waited until people doubted themselves. They both smiled when they saw me. Not warmly, not kindly. Politely. The way you smile at someone you've already beaten. The lawyer, Mr. Harrington, cleared his throat and began. Assets, accounts, properties. Each sentence landed like a quiet applause for Owen and Claire. The lake house, Owen, the investment portfolio, Claire, the primary residence, sold, proceeds split between them. I waited, I kept waiting. My name didn't come. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then came the sentence. Daniel will not be receiving anything from the estate. I laughed. Actually laughed. Because that's what your body does when reality becomes ridiculous. Sorry, I said, can you repeat that? Mr. Harrington adjusted his glasses. Your father made his intentions very clear. Owen finally looked at me then. Not surprised, not guilty. Satisfied. Claire tilted her head, voice soft as poison. You always were more emotional than practical, Daniel. Dad didn't trust you with money. There it was. The story they'd been telling without me in the room. I felt heat crawl up my neck. I lived with him, I took care of him, I was there when. Owen cut me off with a chuckle. Don't start playing the martyr. You stayed because you had nowhere else to go. That one hurt because part of it was true. But not all of it. And they knew that. Here's the part no one likes to admit. I wasn't the favorite, but I was the constant. When Owen left for college, I stayed. When Claire moved across the country, I stayed. When my father's health started slipping, guess who drove him to appointments? Who cooked? Who cleaned? Who slept lightly because they were listening for a fall in the night? Me. But none of that came with receipts. And Owen and Claire, they came with paperwork. The lawyer slid a copy of the will across the table. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. Owen leaned forward. No hard feelings, right? Dad made his choice. I stared at him. You mean you made it? Claire's smile didn't move. Careful, Daniel, accusations won't change anything. Besides, she added, you should be grateful. You got to live there rent-free for years. That word, grateful, did something to me. Because suddenly, every sacrifice I'd made was being rewritten as debt. As they stood to leave, Owen clapped me on the shoulder. This is for the best, clean break, time to move on. Move on. From my father, from my home, from my past. From the truth. I didn't argue, I didn't yell, I didn't beg. I watched them walk out together, laughing quietly, already planning their next steps. And that's when I realized something terrifying. They weren't nervous. People who have done nothing wrong are careless. People who have done something very wrong are confident, right up until the moment they're exposed. What they didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that my phone was still recording. Not the meeting. Something older. Something I'd never meant to use. A late-night conversation, a family talk, a moment they thought was private. A moment where the truth slipped. I hadn't planned revenge. Not yet. But as I sat alone in that conference room, staring at the will that erased me, one thought kept repeating in my head. They didn't just cut me out of the will. They rewrote history. And I had proof they never expected me to keep. They think the story is over. That I lost. That I'll walk away quietly. But what they don't understand is this. You can take everything from a man except his voice. And mine was already saved. There's a strange calm that comes after humiliation. Not peace, not acceptance. It's the quiet you feel when something inside you shuts off and something else wakes up. I didn't leave the lawyer's office right away. I sat there long after Owen and Claire were gone, staring at the empty chairs they'd left behind. Their warmth was still in the room, like fingerprints you couldn't wipe away. Mr. Harrington cleared his throat. Daniel, if you have questions. I stood up, no. Because questions implied confusion. And I was suddenly very clear. That night, I went back to my father's house. My house. At least it had been. Owen had already changed the locks. I stood on the porch with a cardboard box of my things, keys dangling uselessly from my hand, and felt something snap. Inside, lights were on, music played softly. They were celebrating. I knocked. Claire opened the door just enough to block the entrance, her smile tight. You shouldn't be here, she said. I looked past her. You didn't even wait a day. Owen appeared behind her, glass of whiskey in hand. We are being generous, he said. You can pick up the rest of your stuff tomorrow with notice. Notice. Like I was a tenant. Like I hadn't slept in that house for the last decade. I nodded slowly. Dad's watch. I left it on the dresser. Claire's eyes flickered. We'll mail it. That's when I knew. They weren't just cutting me out. They were erasing me. My phone rang the next morning. Unknown number. I answered anyway. Owen didn't bother with greetings. I heard you were asking questions. I leaned against my car, watching rain slide down the windshield. About my own life, yeah. A pause. Then his voice dropped. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. There it was. Not concern, not regret. Control. You already took everything, I said. What's left to make harder? He laughed, but it sounded forced. You really think Dad didn't see through you? Living there, playing nurse, hoping it'd pay off. My grip tightened on the phone. You want to believe that, I said quietly, because the truth would make you uncomfortable. Silence. Then. Let it go, Daniel. I almost told him then. Almost said, I have something you don't want me to have. But revenge is patient. And I was just getting started. Claire tried a different approach. She showed up at my apartment that evening. Unannounced. Perfectly dressed like always, calm, reasonable. She sat at my tiny kitchen table, like she owned it. I want to help you move forward, she said. I poured coffee, didn't offer her any. By doing what? She sighed, by being honest. That word again. Honest. Dad was worried about you, she continued, about your stability, your anger. I laughed, my anger. She nodded sympathetically. You record people, Daniel, that's not normal. My heart skipped, but my face didn't change. I record conversations so I don't forget things, I said. Dad knew that. Her eyes sharpened. Delete anything you have, she said softly. Whatever you think it is, it won't help you. There it was. Fear, buried beneath concern. After she left, I sat alone and played the recording again. Not the whole thing. Just the part that mattered. Owen's voice, low, impatient. He doesn't need to know. We'll say Dad changed his mind. Claire responding, sharper than usual. Make sure the paperwork matches. If Daniel asks questions, we shut him down. Then my father's voice, tired, confused. I just want it to be fair. And Owen again. It is, trust us. That was the moment. The moment everything tipped. They hadn't just benefited. They'd guided. Word traveled fast. Families stopped calling, friends grew awkward. Someone had told a story. And I was the villain in it. Money brings out the worst in people, one cousin said, avoiding my eyes. Another texted, maybe it's time to accept Dad's wishes. Their wishes, not his. That's how manipulation works. You don't just steal, you rewrite the narrative so the victim looks unreasonable for noticing. For a brief moment, I wondered if it was working. If staying silent would be easier. Then Owen texted me a photo. My father's study. Empty. Caption. Clearing things out, hope you're doing okay. That's when the calm disappeared. I called Mr. Harrington the next morning. Hypothetically, I said, if someone had evidence that a will was influenced, what would happen? He paused. Longer than he had during the reading. That would change everything. I looked at the recording app on my phone. At the date stamp. At the voices frozen in time. Good, I said, because I think it's time we talked. They thought silence meant surrender. They thought isolation meant weakness. What they didn't realize was this. I wasn't gathering sympathy. I was gathering leverage. And soon, they wouldn't be the ones deciding what gets heard. There's a moment, right before a storm, when the air feels wrong. Too still, too heavy. That's how the lawyer's office felt the second time I walked in. Mr. Harrington didn't offer me a seat this time. He closed the door instead. You said you had something, he began carefully, something significant. I took out my phone. Didn't explain, didn't warn him. I just pressed play. Owen's voice filled the room first. Confident, dismissive. Then Claire. Controlled, sharp. And finally, my father's, hesitant, tired, unsure. By the time the recording stopped, Mr. Harrington hadn't moved. Not even a blink. That conversation, he said slowly, was recorded when? 3 months before he died. Were they aware they were being recorded? No. He nodded once, absorbing it. This changes the legal posture considerably. I exhaled for the first time in days. Harrington leaned back, fingers steepled. If we proceed, they will know you have something, and once they know, they will respond. I know, I said. What you're alleging is undue influence, he continued. That means scrutiny, depositions, motives examined. I lived with him, I said. They didn't. Harrington studied me. They will try to discredit you. I met his gaze. They already are. The letters went out that afternoon. Formal, polite, devastating. By evening, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Owen called first. I let it ring. Claire texted next. Claire, we need to talk, now. Then Owen again, voicemail this time. You think you're being clever, but you're playing with fire. I deleted it. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is loud. This was focus. They asked for a meeting. Neutral location. Same conference room. Same table. Different energy. Owen didn't sit back this time. Claire didn't smile. They looked alert. Predatory. You've made some serious accusations, Owen said. I folded my hands. I brought evidence. Claire leaned forward. You're misinterpreting a private conversation. I tilted my head. You told me to delete it. Why, if it meant nothing? Her jaw tightened. Just a fraction. Enough. Owen laughed sharply. You've always had this habit of exaggerating. There it is, I said calmly. Claire cut in. Dad was confused near the end, you know that. I stared at her. So confused, he trusted you to speak for him. Silence. Then Owen snapped. What do you want? Not what's true. Not what's fair. What do you want? That's when I knew they were scared. Claire stood abruptly. You don't understand what you're risking, she said. People will look very closely at how you lived with Dad. I raised an eyebrow. Are you threatening me? Her lips parted. She'd gone too far. Mr. Harrington cleared his throat sharply. I suggest everyone choose their words carefully. Too late. Because threats sound different when they're documented. And my phone was face down on the table. Recording. Owen noticed. Too late. His eyes flicked to the phone. Then to me. Then back again. Turn that off, he said. No, I replied. Claire's composure finally slipped. You're enjoying this, she hissed. I shook my head. No, I'm ending it. Harrington gathered his papers. At this point, he said, I recommend mediation before we move forward. Owen scoffed, or what? Harrington looked him dead in the eye. Or this becomes public record. That landed hard. Claire sat down slowly. The predator, realizing the trap is already closed. They left without another word. This time I stayed seated. Because for the first time since my father died, I wasn't the one being pushed out. That night, I received one final message from Owen. You think you've won, you haven't. I didn't reply. Because winning wasn't the point anymore. Truth was. And it was about to be played for everyone to hear. They thought fear would stop me. They thought intimidation would work. But they forgot one thing. They taught me how to survive in that house. And now, everything they built was standing on a recording they couldn't erase. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, emotionally. Cold like a place where stories go to be weighed, stripped of excuses, and decided by people who don't care who you are supposed to be. Owen sat on one side of the aisle, Claire beside him. They didn't look at me. Not once. Mr. Harrington adjusted his cufflinks and leaned toward me. Once this starts, he said quietly, there's no undoing it. I nodded. I know. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about letting the truth speak without being talked over. The judge entered, everyone rose. Formalities followed, dates, names, procedural language meant to drain emotion from memory. Owen's attorney spoke first. Confident, smooth. He painted a picture of me as unstable, resentful, opportunistic. A disgruntled family member, he said, attempting to rewrite a man's final wishes. Claire watched the judge closely, nodding at the right moments. They'd rehearsed this. They always did. Then it was our turn. Mr. Harrington stood. "Your Honor," he said, "we don't intend to argue feelings." He paused. "We intend to present facts." He turned slightly and looked at me. "This court has already reviewed the recording in question," Harrington continued, "but we request permission to play a specific portion uninterrupted." Owen's attorney objected. Briefly, weakly, the judge considered, then nodded. "Proceed." Harrington pressed the button, and the room filled with voices that hadn't expected witnesses. No commentary, no framing, no explanation. Just words, raw and unprotected. When the recording ended, no one spoke. Not Owen, not Claire, not their lawyer. Because for the first time, they weren't controlling the narrative. They were inside it. Owen stared straight ahead. Claire's hands trembled in her lap. Not because they'd lost, but because they'd been heard. That's the thing about truth, it doesn't need to argue. It just exists. The judge leaned forward. "I have a question," she said. Owen looked up, relief flickering, hope that this could still be managed. "Why," the judge continued, "was this conversation never disclosed during the drafting of the will?" Claire opened her mouth, then closed it. Her attorney placed a hand on her arm. Too late. The answer was already obvious. The ruling didn't come that day. People expect fireworks. There weren't any. Just quiet. The kind that settles after something irreversible has happened. But as we filed out, something had changed. People looked at me differently. Not with pity. With recognition. Weeks later, the house sat empty. Locked. Waiting. I stood on the porch one last time, not to reclaim it, but to release it. I wasn't moving back in. I didn't need to. What I needed was already done. One final text came through. From Owen. No insults, no threats. Just this. "You didn't have to do it like that." I stared at the screen, then deleted it. Because here's the truth he still didn't understand. I didn't do it to them. I did it so I could stop carrying what they tried to bury. People ask if it was worth it. If the fallout hurt. If family can ever recover from something like that. Maybe. Maybe not. But I sleep at night now. And they don't get to decide my story anymore. They cut me out of the will. They thought silence would erase me. But when the lawyer pressed play, the truth didn't ask for permission.